Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to our second in a series of roundtable discussions. Today we're going to be talking around the topic of Will AI Impact Cybersecurity? So let me introduce myself first. My name's Steve Stobo, and today I'm representing IMSM as a ISO specialist. Now, my background is in cybersecurity, risk management and compliance. So hopefully I'm going to bring some insight into how ISO standards like ISO 27001 for information security fit in with AI for cybersecurity. So joining me on the round table is James Dell. He's the head technical architect and associate director at Planet IT. Now, James is a leading voice in IT in the UK, and after a decade of working in IT management, he then went on to join Planet IT and now leads a technical architecture team and brings with him a proven track record in the design and implementation of robust and secure infrastructure solutions, but with a core focus on cybersecurity and all things AI. Next, I'd like to introduce Ben Waymark. Now, Ben's an accomplished Chief Technology Officer with a rich background as a software engineer spanning over 2 decades. In addition to his expertise in software engineering, Ben is recognised as an innovation specialist. Notably, he's the driving force behind the Nottingham Data Science and Artificial Intelligence Meetup group, so feel free to Google that and join. And he brings his commitment to fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange in these dynamic fields. And finally, also joins today is Rhys Edwards. Rhys plays a vital role in IMSM's marketing team and brings with him a deep passion for artificial intelligence. His extensive experience encompasses working with large language models from both a front and back end perspective, and through his work, Rhys has uncovered innovative ways to harness the power of AI to enhance IMSM's marketing strategies. Now, I'll pass the reins over to Rhys to commence our discussion by posing the first question. So, Rhys, over to you.
All right, nice one. Thank you very much, Steve. So the first question is, what are the potential benefits and challenges of using AI for threat detection, risk assessment, and incident response in alignment with ISO 27001?
Great question.
I'll jump straight in, I suppose, with the obvious thing, which is when we're doing anything, when we're talking AI, when we're talking about feeding information into large language models or into any kind of processing machine learning, it's the natural risk always comes from what data you're feeding it, right? Where that data is going to. So who's the owner of that system? So who looks after that large language model? What are they going to do with the data you're feeding it to? That's always a risk, and that's the bit everyone talks about, right? The scary stuff, it's going to go wrong, we're going to lose everything. But the benefits are massive. If you're looking at anything related to, especially cybersecurity incident response, and you're going, I don't really know what this does, and how do I resolve this? Having a large language model or something that can go, cool, here's a load of data, and I can give you a human answer that you can then go, right, I need to go and tackle this and do this, or I'm going to go and look at this for further information. That's a huge win. And it helps you to really drive things forward when you're looking at, how you do incident response. You've just got to find that balance, right? You've got to have that balance of making changes and using these tools versus, do we know what we're doing with this data? And it's always having that risk assessment done up front and going, well, where are we going to put this data if we need to do incident response, rather than doing it on the fly and using a public model or something where you go, right, I need a hand. I'm going to chuck this data out there and hope that someone can fix it for me. We need to have more of a logical approach to it, which I think is where people at the moment are probably falling over, where they're just running straight at, whatever's on Google as the first response for a large language model that will help them.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially because things like, the ISO 27001, that does mandate a systematic approach to risk management, and AI will contribute in a positive way by automating a lot of those risk assessment processes. And as we know, like machine learning algorithms, AI algorithms can analyze both historical data, identify patterns, and also assess potential risks, which I suppose enables organizations to make better informed decisions in line with ISO 27001's risk assessment requirements. But I think there are lots and lots of benefits associated with AI and around threat detection, risk assessment, and both incident response.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, all artificial intelligence comes down to pattern matching patterns and pattern matching, and it gets more and more sophisticated way of pattern matching, which is specifically which is also what pretty much all security software, it's what virus scanners, it's what firewall, a lot of the scanners and firewalls do. So there's a real opportunity with AI to be able to increase and to get a lot more sophisticated way that you do the heuristics for these scanners. And when you're using AI pattern matching as opposed to very sophisticated regular expressions or other sort of logical expressions, you're opening yourself up to be able to detect a lot more sophisticated patterns. And most attacks, not all, but most attacks have some degree of automation towards them. And when you're using any sort of automated attack, that pattern matching is really difficult to get around, because it's very difficult to make a pattern, to produce a pattern that doesn't follow something that the AI will have already been trained on, especially if it's looking for previous attacks. That being said, the big challenge with it as well, because there's the benefits and there's the challenges, and the challenge is that that same pattern matching can also be used to help detect, to counter the measures. So you can look at to see what the typical outcome of a AI-enabled threat detection will be, and try and find countermeasures towards that if you're the one doing the attacking. So it becomes a bit of a AI arms race. But you hope that the extra compute power that generally the good guys have is going to be enough to win that race.
Yeah, and to what you're saying, Ben, that's exactly what you see when you look at, like, what vendors are doing in that cybersecurity space. Is they're building their own AI tools, but trying to do that a little bit more cloak and dagger than some of the other more open large language models, and kind of AI in general is being sort of done in a very open way, right? Because we're all a bit concerned about the risks behind it. But these security vendors are building in machine learning, and they're building in AI to it, but they're kind of being like, just trust us, because the more we tell you, the more that's public, the easier it is for those bad actors to then essentially retro-engineer what the AI is going to do and make the technology next to useless in terms of protection. So it's going to be that constant, attack and defense kind of approach. But it can only be seen as a positive, right? The more intelligence you give to people, the more you skill people up to be able to resolve threats, to deal with incidents, the better you're going to protect your business, and ultimately the better you're going to protect the data that your business holds.
Yeah, I think, with that arms race, it also enables businesses to get their resources optimized in the best area by allowing the automation and the fight against who's got the most computing power, to all intents and purposes, where they can focus on more strategic aspects of the information security, and enabling them to then use their skills as consultants, as security professionals, to supplement the AI in the first place.
So there's an interesting sort of aside to this, is phishing attacks have become a lot more sophisticated, and the age-old technique where you can tell it's a phishing attack because of the atrocious spelling and grammar, simply having good proofreading means that you're actually able to produce a fake email from PayPal or from whatever sort of source you're coming by to try and do this phishing attack. But what that means is, that also means that we stop relying on lazy ways of preventing these, because a lot of the phishing attacks you used to be able to tell because of the terrible grammar, but not all of them. And that's often where people got compromised, is because as soon as somebody did some proper proofreading, got some better text together, then the phishing attacks were quite successful. So it is a good way of making sure that we're more diligent, that the training's better, that we look for better cues, like what's the email address, what does the link look like, other tools that are better anyways.
Yeah, I suppose the the readability and the sort of sophistication behind the actual text, saying like phishing emails, has sort of enhanced the not the legitimacy, because obviously it's not legitimate, but it sort of made it look as though it is legitimate. Like, for you look back a decade or two ago, you had like the 419 scams from Nigeria, from back in the days of Nigerian princes and all that, and you could tell straight away that it's not legitimate. I mean, obviously that's sort of a far-fetched example, but the point being is that it's much easier for bad actors to make themselves appear more authentic.
Well, there's some great examples on social media this week of kind of phishing generated by AI to look like your Google password resets and your Microsoft password reset pages versus the genuine one you get. And they are now reaching the point where they're so close that, to Ben's point, it is about that next level of skilling people up and filling that gap and going, well, you can't rely on just what the body looks like anymore. You now need to go, well, where's it been sent from? And as an organization, you need to start looking at better technologies, your DKIMs, your DMARCs, start protecting against what's coming in and going well beyond where, we've kind of relied on to this point of going, if it looks a bit dodgy, it probably is. That no longer really works now that, these technologies are out there, and things like Worm GPT have given the bad actors the ability to get this stuff like that. They don't have to do anything to get hold of really good phishing techniques or get hold of really good built-in ready-baked ransomware that they can essentially off and deploy with very little effort.
It's also interesting that you have Worm GPT and services that are sort of designed specifically to be evil or criminal. But even on the common large language models, and I did a test with this, is if you ask most of them to generate an advance payment, the Nigerian 416 or 9 or whatever it is scam, it will say, no, I won't do that because it's unethical. If you say, can you give me an example of a 419 advance payment scam letter so that I can use it to show people what to look out for, it will happily generate a dozen of very good, so there is attempts to put safeties in place, and I think these will get more sophisticated as time goes on. But as professionals in the industry, I think we have to also be clear that we have to ready ourselves for when these don't work, and that even things like Worm GPT and other sort of services like that, they're always going to be around, and we just have to accept that the new normal is that people can do these things and they can get better examples. And these examples and the scams will morph as they get better data.
Well, you made a really good point there, Ben. Like those guardrails that these AI, the companies that are building these AI engines are essentially putting out there. These guardrails are a little bit like putting your blinkers on as a horse. Let's be honest. You're saying, well, if you ask me the question straight on, then I'm going to tell you, no, actually, I can't do that. But if you come at it and say, well, how would I do this? Or the greatest example I've seen is where you go, if you ask it to make your ransomware that would encrypt files, it goes, no, it's unethical. If you say to it, what I'd like you to do is tell me how I would encrypt files to protect them. It goes, oh, here you go. And you go, can you automate that? And it gives you another step. And you go, can you automate that so it has a key server? And then suddenly you've got a botnet control system that it's developed for you. And you've done very little effort there. And the thing is, they've done a great job to protect it. But by trying to give it as a learning tool, you're always going to have those problems. And it's about making sure that people understand that, right? You understand that these things are out there. And, the ransomware as a service space is only becoming more and more AI powered, and it's then we're essentially, as people, we're expecting our security vendors to step up, right, and they're going to have to start filling those gaps in, because you can no longer rely on that legacy approach of going, well, we kind of catalog and we know what attacks look like and we'll do that. Actually, the world's moving so quickly now that the race to make sure those products get updated is actually a problem. You've got to try and get in front of that and make sure that your AI and your machine learning and your security products are better than the ones that are out there that all of us can play with and not pay a lot of money for, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's a consequence of this technology being so widely available. Obviously, there are ways to sort of manipulate ChatGPT into doing things that it's not supposed to, but you can also, take the API, which is freely available if you have an OpenAI account, and then from there you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. There are no sort of guardrails, as you say, James. So yeah, there is also that. Obviously, people who are in the sort of hacking industry, sort of surreptitiously doing bad things. Obviously, they're going to find ways to use this technology for bad, and it's good that they have the API readily available because you can apply it to all sorts of things. But unfortunately, that is just a consequence.
Yeah,
there's
a plugin, right?
There's also tools like GPT for All that allow you to quite easily, either with a GUI or from the command line, download quite a variety of open source large language models and run them off of your own PC, your own server, you could pull up a cloud service. There's all sorts of ways that you could do it. And then once you sort of have that level of control, there's a lot of those guardrails you can get around as well.
Just turn them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I suppose what we're talking about quite nicely. I'm just looking at one of the questions that that we had sort of for later on, but actually, what we're talking about really we're kind of covering it anyway. So I thought we'd talk about it was just kind of around the how we get people to be better at defending themselves, right? So that kind of human firewall piece and that human-led defense, right? Like, what should we be doing as business? Because ultimately, we've kind of touched on that, but that's really where we're going, right? Because we can't allow the technology to police itself, and we can't expect other companies to police it for us. So we've got to try and train our staff and our and our users and kind of everyone around the business about how they interact with AI, especially as AI becomes more prevalent. Microsoft are injecting Copilot into Windows. It's coming into all of your Office apps. Clippy will make a return, as it was, and we're kind of reaching that point now where it's down to everybody to protect themselves from it. It can't be something that we expect business leaders, CTOs. It's not something that we can expect to be led from the top. It has to be through the levels. Obviously, anyone got any kind of ideas about how you do that? How would you would you push that kind of defense down to the everyday user?
I think it's if I jump in here, I think you've got to have a good security awareness program. As well as do things like simple phishing simulations. So that aids, I think, helping people build resilience against social engineering tactics. Because if you've never experienced a sophisticated phishing attack or phishing simulation, how would you know what to look out for? So simulating those areas can really help, I suppose, educate the users. This is what a typical phishing attack may look like, or this is what a very sophisticated phishing attack generated by AI may look like. And I think, like you said, James, it's about making sure users are aware of what potential threats are actually out there and fostering that workforce to be knowledgeable about cybersecurity threats and also best practices.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
and security is a state of mind as much as anything else, and it's getting that way, making sure that everyone's thinking that way. So we had a sort of a funny but weird example from one of the places I worked, where one day at an office, somebody came in with a clipboard and a red vest and said that they're here to swap out the water cooler machine. So they just walked off with it. Why anybody would want to steal a water cooler is anyone's guess, but they did. And that sort of simple thing actually had a shift for the whole organization, because they realized, wow, it really is that easy. But once people are thinking about it, I mean, another thing at another organization recently, actually, what happened is every time a new starter started and it was announced on sort of social media, they would get a message either through WhatsApp or LinkedIn or more often than not through their email, because that was easy to guess. And they would say, "Hi, it's the CEO here. Really urgent. I need you to buy me a bunch of what was it? Apple voucher things, the Apple cards things. Can you do that quickly? I need them by this afternoon." But because we started off with the indoctrination into think securely, the media people saw that. They thought, okay, that's weird. Why would the CEO ask me sort of to do that? But you have to get people thinking that way. You have to sort of get a degree of sort of suspicion about everything. But often it only takes a little bit of suspicion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, the big thing is, Steve, you mentioned it, Ben, you mentioned as well, is that kind of, you've got to train your own users, right? You've got to have that strong program, but we've got to get away from this approach that businesses have got, kind of this lazy approach of going, right, we do security awareness training. We do it once a year, or some of them are even worse. We do it when you start, right? Part of your induction package, you do a security awareness training, and that's a tick in a box, and we don't care about it. And we've got to get out of that mentality. We've got to start looking and saying, right, this needs to be a core part of what every employee does, because it's everyone from your admin assistant, your person answering the phone, all the way through to CEO. They all have the ability to compromise huge chunks of data now by doing something they think is really helpful to the business, right? I saw an example where a HR manager had uploaded an entire database into an open source, a AI engine to ask it to calculate some things like Bradford factor and stuff for staff. But they published the names, they published social security numbers, addresses, and the problem is that stuff was stored in a token, and that token was then returned by someone who was essentially trying to break an AI engine, and they got that data back, and it was like, cool, I have your data now. And it's like that HR person probably thought they were doing something really useful, going, well, this will take me hours to calculate all this. Let's let AI do it. Yeah, cool. But actually, the logic of what they've done is they've essentially just leaked a huge chunk of data. So we have to start getting people to understand that. And it's something that I've been really fighting with over the last 12 months, is to say to people, right, this yearly approach or this once in a lifetime approach doesn't work. It should be regular, it should be audited, and it should be interactive. It shouldn't just be, I'm going to show you a video about cybersecurity. It should be those phishing tests. It should be, here's some training about how you should be working with AI. Here's some training about what data you should be publishing into the cloud, what risks you've got when sending stuff over email, all those kind of things, and building this kind of path of, we're developing and we're growing our employees to be that human firewall and that piece of protection for the business. Because you can have the best technology in the world, especially with AI, but if one person does something a bit stupid, we're going to end up in trouble.
Yeah, there's always going to be human error. I don't think you can always trust in people's common sense. Sorry. I was just going to say, common sense can't always be trusted. So I think you always have to keep people up to date with these things, especially because, it's still such a new sort of fresh technology that is being, deployed widely. I think there is still sort of a sense of naivety among a lot of people. So I think you need to sort of have measures in place to let people know, about this new technology.
I think what we've been doing with implementing ISO 27001 for businesses is making sure that they foster a security culture. It's not about being reactive, it's about people actively participating in safeguarding data. And that can come from a variety of different ways. Yes, there's education, and there's training courses, but a lot of employees may see that as, oh God, I've got to do the security training today, blah, blah, blah. And they sort of go through it and probably trying to do 3 other jobs at once because everyone has a job to do. But it's about getting good, effective communication in on a regular basis. The security updates, policies of changes. These are the best practices that people should be doing. These are the things that you need to look out for. And I suppose it's making sure that they're aware, the employees are aware that cybersecurity and attacks are evolving at a tremendous pace. And as professionals, we kind of get a bit complacent with it because we're dealing with it all the time. But if you are a data inputter or you're working in an office or in a factory or wherever, cybersecurity might not pop into your mind at all times, but if the business is sending regular information, these are the latest threats, these are what to look out for, these are the best practices to do, then that really does help towards, I think, fostering that security culture. And it also needs to be directed from the top. The board needs to be pushing this down into the business, going, not just as a reactive, crap, we've been breached, now what we're going to do, panic, make people aware of the security threats, but it needs to come from the top of the business down.
Yeah, definitely. And I found that if you, what we did to foster this, one of the things to foster this is really encourage people to tell everyone when they see something. So as a security professional, as a CTO, as a network person, I admit it's actually kind of irritating when someone lets me know every time that they've got a phishing email. But actually, it's really good practice if you let them know, and then you bring that up in front of the company saying, hey, everyone, look, Rhys or Steve or James, they found this, they found this shit, because it sort of makes it a bit fun, and it keeps it sort of in people's mind. But also means that you sort of have a culture where somebody says, oh yeah, I just emailed, or someone just emailed me a list of all the staff so that I could set up the usernames in our system. Is that okay? And then you could be like, well, actually, glad you mentioned that, because no, that's not how you should be sending everyone's, sort of name and phone numbers in a GDPR compliant way. And it sort of starts covering off all the other elements. And again, all stuff that predates AI, predates all this, but with it getting more sophisticated, you just have to you have to push it more. You have to push that security culture more.
What do you guys think around things like user behavior analytics in there as well? You know, the good guys, AI, using that to detect anomalies and potential malicious activities is again another way of helping in this area.
Well, this is really interesting in the world of cloud providers and you know, general scanning. Is there's a lot of tools out there now that look for any sort of an anomaly. So they'll be able to see any deviation from a pattern if you're providing any sort of a SaaS service or some sort of online service, where it will suddenly say, this microservice is running with a lot more memory than it usually does, or the processor spiking and all that. And there's a lot of that. You can do it through simple, you know, go into whatever tool you're using and set what the thresholds are. But if you do it through pattern matching, it can become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more useful, because things that you wouldn't think about, like it's saying, okay, at 4 o'clock on a Monday morning, this spiked and it's never done that before. You wouldn't put a rule in quite like that. It would take too much time to put that many rules in. But if you use the AI for monitoring, and I've used it before and I've seen demos of it before, and it's actually quite magical.
Yeah, I've seen it around the sort of user experience where they go, right, Steve normally logs on to Outlook first at 9 o'clock, and then he maybe uses Excel for a period of time. But then they spot an anomaly where all of a sudden he's tried to go onto a corporate part of the network he never normally goes onto before and try to log in that way. And looking for anomalies like that from a user behavior point of view as well. And some of those technologies are really evolving, looking for, I suppose, like you say, pattern recognition, what you mentioned right at the top of the round table, Ben, around it's not normal behavior for Steve to want to go into this particular system at this time of day. It might not, he might need to as part of his job, but let's just flag that up to somebody to take a deeper look into it.
Yeah, definitely. I just saw one of the questions that flew up at the bottom, which kind of ties into what we're talking about, which is kind of like, what should we be considering when choosing an AI platform for your business? I think that's you know, kind of what you're alluding to about that, the managing risk, managing understanding, that kind of comes into this play, right? So, you know, there's lots of these people out there. Every man and his dog has an AI engine now, let's be honest. There's so many different people pushing their agenda for it. There's some of the big ones that we all know about. The question is, from my point of view, is that what do you want to get out of it, right? So if you're choosing a platform, it should be about what the business gain is. Once you've had that conversation, it's then about managing that risk and saying, well, do we trust the person that we're, you know, or people's or company that owns and manufactures this platform? There's a couple of these companies that are making, you know, generative AI platforms, and you wouldn't trust them with a lot of data, and you're going, do we really trust them with this? And they're trying to be quite open about what they do. It still gives you that kind of feeling of going, it's my data, it's my money, I'm not gonna trust this platform. And it's kind of finding that balance. For me, it's all about, you know, who do you want to give that data to, right? I don't know how you guys see that, but certainly from the context of data security, I think it's a good conversation to have.
There's a few things with this. One of the biggest ones is it actually AI? Because the nice thing of anyone's bandwagon is you can jump on and pretty much say everything's AI, and there's no clear legal definition of what's a logic tree, what's programming logic, and what's actually using pattern recognition. Which also leads to, is it proven? Because there's also lots of claims. I don't know if it was true or not, but I remember hearing rumors that when Google had that AI that was making the phone calls, that a lot of people were noticed that Google was talking in an Irish accent, and apparently that was because there was a lot of unemployed Irish people in California that were employed to help make the calls, because it was working some of the time, but not all the time. Like all AI, you have to have human intervention, but I think some people believe it was sold as a lot more AI than it might have been. And then the other big one, and I think you sort of touched on this a bit, James, is the are you giving away your data? Are you giving away your intellectual property? Pretty much the minute ChatGPT came out, I came out with a policy for using ChatGPT, which is basically as well as don't give any data to ChatGPT or any other, like any personal data, any any of employee data, because that would violate GDPR. But also B, like, think about what our intellectual property is, because if you're taking reams of code and sticking it into some sort of public domain, that can affect you if you're ever trying to defend that code against somebody who's copying it. And it's similar with Stack Overflow and other online tools, but because it doesn't get published online, people may not think about it. But who knows who's going to be running ChatGPT in another week or two, and what they're going to want to do, and what they're going to want to do with that data. Sorry, we agreed we wouldn't talk about that.
Or in an hour,
or in
instantly you make the talk irrelevant, isn't it? That's the cool.
Yeah.
I suppose, Steve, it's a question for you, because you're the kind of the specialist in this area. It's like, if you're picking a platform, what should you be doing from an ISO point of view? Because obviously it's easy for us, like certainly for me as Ben, as technical people, to go, right, we like this, it looks good, the tool's good, we're happy with it. But then how do you rubber stamp that and say it sits inside that compliance window?
Yeah, well, ISO bought out the new version in October last year of 27001, which is a 2022 version. And I think they bought in a lot of areas, not specifically around AI, but Control 2 is about the use of basically cloud services. And it makes the business think about how they should be used to better secure and protect users' information. But I think even before you start using AI or any cloud service, the business needs to, understand how they're going to choose it and how's it actually going to be used. And that was what Ben was saying around, stopping people putting personal information into other ChatGPT or other AI tools are available. What are the requirements of around security for that particular cloud service or AI cloud service? I think one of the important ones is who's responsible for the governance on how it should be used. Is that IT's responsibility? Is that HR and legal and finance's responsibility? Or is it the board's responsibility? And then who's responsible for securing that cloud in the first place? If they have a breach, is it your responsibility to secure that cloud? And where are the lines of responsibility? And if a lot of business now are looking at multiple cloud platforms, so how do you manage multiple cloud platforms? Incident management, how do you do that around AI cloud services? And I suppose from a security point of view, how does that particular service fit in with your overall cybersecurity strategy? But then when you have a bad experience with them, or if ChatGPT disappears and OpenAI becomes Microsoft or whatever the latest things that people are saying on social media, how do you migrate from one cloud service to another AI cloud service? And I think these areas are what ISO 27001 addresses, making sure that businesses have processes and procedures and policies in place to make sure that they are protected if they're going to be using AI technology in the cloud. But like we said on the last one, James, where it's probably safer to bring it in-house and have your own instance.
It's also worth noting, though, that the processing costs for a lot of AI can get very, very expensive very quickly, which isn't in itself a cybersecurity issue. But what happens is, because the processing cost is really expensive, you start off and you say, okay, we're going to use this Amazon, we're going to use this Google Cloud, we're going to use this Azure service or whatever. Then it gets really expensive. Then you start looking to see, oh, maybe we can use this stack of NVIDIA GPUs to be able to use the processing power on that because that's cheaper, or use it on the new Mac laptops, which particularly the latest chip is very much focused around being able to process. But what that means is that you're throwing the data around, especially if you're using it to training data. So you could be sitting there with a huge chunk of very sensitive data that's going onto someone's laptop at home on their remote policy that has no firewall or anything, because it usually doesn't, while their kids in the next room downloading RuneScape mods that are full of who knows what has it, and next thing you know, all your data is suddenly out on the internet somewhere being sold to the highest bidder. So really, you have to be sort of aware of the costs, aware of those, and then what everyone's doing with it, because the other big issue is that people don't know a lot about what the processes are. They don't know what's going on. A lot of senior managers, a lot of heads of and CTOs, it's all a bit of a mystery to them. So if you're not sort of down with some of the with a lot of the details around it, these risks can appear and can be happening without you ever seeing it, because you just don't know what you don't know. So yeah, so you don't know what the engineers are doing.
Yeah, I think that comes down to making sure requirements are clearly understood by the business. What benefits are they trying to get out of the AI service? Is it, or are they just getting it for AI's sake, which I've seen quite a few businesses do? Right, we're going to get an AI engine. Why? Well, everyone's got it, so we need it. But what's the scope? What are you trying to do with it? What's the business benefit to you as an organization for using that element of AI? Well, everyone's using it. We've got to use it for marketing. We've got to use it for sales, for templates, for security. We've got to use it for absolutely everything. But it's about why are you actually doing that? And we always ask that question, why are you choosing that particular AI service? What are you trying to achieve? And then make sure that that service can meet your business needs.
Yeah, there are so many factors to consider, obviously beyond just cybersecurity factors. Like, I suppose you would also be thinking about scalability, integration into sort of existing workflows, and obviously the features that you're after. Like you said, Steve, sort of rather than having AI just for the sake of AI, what exactly you want to achieve from it. So I think this is a good point to sort of move on to the next question. So, will AI get better over time at brute forcing or guessing passwords, quickly making them useless? So, what do you guys think about that?
Well, we're already seeing that drag towards this position, right? So you'll see, especially the big vendors out there, your Microsofts, your Googles, people like that, Apple, are all starting to, the MFA question, or multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, is no longer we'd like you to have this. It's you're gonna have this. And you're seeing that more and more because these platforms are subject so heavily to kind of brute force attacks now, and the sophistication of them, that you don't actually need to be that good. And we talked about ransomware as a service. You don't need to be that good technically to actually start doing this. So these platforms are already starting to put those technologies in place, and we're already, as an industry, having to start stacking on top of that things like risk-based access control, where we start, back to Steve's point about, am I doing the thing that you expect at this time of the day, or from the right location on the right device, starting to ring fence that access and say, well, Steve can only use his laptop to access 365 if he's in the UK and it's a Monday to Friday, right? We start going, these controls start to mean that we can start to protect against what is already happening, which is those, your passwords are starting to fall to pieces. And most people's My Dog 1 password is not going to hold up much of a defense anymore.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've had I think now 3 or 4 conferences that I've been at, none of them related specifically to security, all of which have brought up both multi-factor authentication and also passkey, which is becoming more and more common. And I think at a sort of a high level, a lot of the big tech companies are recognizing the risk that's here and really trying to get in quickly to find ways of mitigating that. There's also a sort of a tangentially related threat of quantum computing, which has the potential through its what do they call it? Basically through its modeling to totally destroy all pretty much all the encryption that we have, and even the strongest encryption we have, to be able to simply flip that on its head and destroy it. So really, I think it's looking for new ways. I think a lot of people have recognized for a while now that passwords actually aren't a great way of securing things. But it's always been, well, what do you use? And is like passkey is great because usually you're using biometric, but you're using biometrics that are stored locally, as opposed to having your biometrics out there with everyone. But I also think we're just going to have to find better in different ways, probably using AI, exactly as James was talking about, to get just better security.
Yeah, I think, Ben, you made a really good point there, which is most people know that it's the right thing to do and it's the way to move. But I'm still have that argument so often with especially SMEs, SMBs who have done ISO 27001 and they're like, oh, we're doing cyber essentials and stuff, and they still don't understand the importance of having multi-factor authentication across the board. They're just like, oh yeah, but it disrupts me. You talked about people working in factories and stuff like that. It disrupts their workflow. It may well disrupt their workflow, but your business would be more disrupted if someone goes in and brute forces onto your system and deletes everything. It's that common sense approach of going, yeah, the 10 seconds that someone is what sort of wasting having to log in with multi-factor authentication is going to save you a lot of time in recovery. And we do need better tools. And you talk about passkits for that. We're definitely seeing that kind of pushed more and more. And I think that whilst we don't really have kind of an agnostic solution, that's where the challenges come from. Like certainly, if you jump between Windows and Mac OS or between iOS and Android, you'll find that these technologies tend to be a bit broken up at the moment. And we need to, hopefully AI will help that. Someone will have a tool that's more centralized in terms of saying, well, this is a platform agnostic solution that will provide that control. But yeah, definitely something to look at.
I suppose it's better to be disruptive than to be vulnerable, isn't it? Because if you don't have these, if you don't have these methods in place with the way that AI is changing now, I think it's become a lot more effective at sort of iterating through possible password combinations. Obviously with the pattern recognition that you were talking about, Ben, it's able to sort of pick up on sort of different types of information that might perhaps inform somebody's password, like where they live or family members' names, things like that. So I think within organizations, I think it's easier to mandate, but I think within the context of the general public as well, they might not always have this sort of awareness of these risks. So I think there's a lot of data out there that is vulnerable.
And the thing is, I mean, I used to sort of have a joke that everyone says security is really important until you put a price tag on it, and it's kind of not that funny because it's very true. And but also risk always has to go, and for that matter, inconvenience always has to go along with what's the consequences, what's the reward. So if you were if it's your sort of I don't know, some sort of fun thing that you do and you're logging onto a video game, it probably doesn't matter if anyone, depending on how serious you take your gaming, but it probably doesn't matter that much whether or not the password gets compromised. Where obviously if it's your banking system, then you have to think a lot more about it. And I think that's a lot of it is you have to do the risk analysis, but you have to do the risk analysis taking into account how easy it might be for a lot of the tools. And there has been, I've got things on my LinkedIn, I've got a presentation on this, but there's tools that have been proof of concept to show exactly how much quicker a brute force using AI can be, just by taking enough different passwords out there in the universe and finding the best sequence to be able to send in all your possible guesses until you get to the right one. And it is an order of magnitude, and it does sort of, it's a bit like us having doubled processing power in RAM. In terms of how much encryption we need to be able to be accessible and how long it needs to be and how many different characters it needs to be.
Yeah, I think having, getting the correct password complexity is important, the correct number of characters, special characters, etc. Multi-factor authentication, again, vitally important as part of safeguarding against that. But then also password policies, making sure that whatever the password policy is, it's being reviewed on a regular basis if new threats emerge.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden it's easy for AI to break a 16-character password in less than a millisecond, then businesses need to adapt and be continuously improving their cybersecurity by looking at what their password policies are, making sure that they're keeping up to date with it. And then there's other areas like, account lockouts. And then as James said earlier about AI-based threat detection, looking at ways that AI can, analyze and evaluate if a business is got any new threats coming into it around passwords and password brute force attacks.
It's also worth noting, this is where ISO, and I swear Steve didn't pay me to say this, but this is where ISO and similar certifications are really handy because it mandates that regular review. You could put that as part of your policies, because even with ISO, having been through a couple of ISO companies, I know that you can be ISO, you can have all the certifications, but usually it's as you're coming up to the audit that you go, oh, what do we need to do? And
scrabble for the paper, yeah.
And, you know, started. So even when you know it's important, you're always fighting conflicting priorities, and having the certifications, which also means when you're looking at AI services, to go back to a previous question, making sure that they have the certifications, that they have the rigor there, is also really important, because if they don't have those, it doesn't mean if they do have them that you're not at risk, but if they don't, there's sort of an extra layer of risk there, because they may have the intention of doing all these things, but it doesn't mean that they will.
Yeah, it's like a red flag, isn't it? If the security company or the AI company you're looking to do has no security policies, procedures, and processes in place,
yeah,
that might be a bit of a red flag. But you're right, around, you know, sort of especially 27001, a lot of businesses do that panic coming up to the end. Quick, let's audit, let's check all our policies and procedures, quickly change them, because but if they've implemented it correctly and they've got the right mindset from the top, it's about that culture again. It's about a culture of security. It's about continuous improvement of their information security. But what we do as a business is we also provide a managed service for those companies that want to ignore it. Rather than waiting, we will come in, review their policies and procedures, give them best practices, say, right, there's new emerging threats in this area and things like that. That's kind of going a bit off topic, sorry.
It's worth mentioning, right? It's definitely something that we're seeing the challenges. I can see Rhys is itching to move on to the next question, so I'll stop talking.
That's all right. It's all very interesting discussion. But yeah, we'll move on to the next one. So, do you guys think that AI could start building and mutating viruses better and quicker than virus detectors can?
Right, we're already seeing that the threat actors out there are making the most use of AI, because that, you know, it's a tool set for them. It cuts down their amount of effort they need to put in, right? So we're already seeing this. What we are seeing, though, is that we have to stop considering antivirus virus detection as kind of legacy AV. That kind of signature-based approach is dead, right? Knowing and cataloging all the kind of viruses out there, which is what we did through the 2000s, doesn't really work anymore. And a lot of companies for a long time have been told what they call next gen AV, which is, I hate anything called next gen because it's just a way to say that we've done something new. But the next gen AV approach, as they would term it, is looking at real time detection and looking at behavior, which in a lot of cases they're using ML, some kind of machine learning. They're using some form of data set to essentially say, if it looks like this, then it potentially is ransomware, and they start playing that. Those companies have to get better, and you see that the ones that are sat in that Gartner Magic Quadrant in the top right, they have got AI, machine learning, as it were, built in a heavy way inside their product, to the point where they have got the best engine in the world. So it doesn't matter how good the threat actors get at coding fast malicious viruses, their product's going to be able to compete against it. Where I see the massive risk is the people that are in that lower section of that Magic Quadrant, or not even on there, in terms of the quality of their AV products, that just don't have these tools, and they're the ones that are going to get really pulled apart by this kind of continual drive to kind of quicker, badder, better viruses and ransomware that we're starting to see happen. That was easy. Everyone's shocked by that answer.
Yeah. No, I think it's about right, really, because it's you get better viruses, and then you get better tools for it. It kind of goes back to the arms race that we sort of started off with, where it is just a matter of, you know, keeping up and keeping going, and I mean, it's kind of always been that case with tech, that you fall asleep for 20 minutes and everything's changed. Anyway. So this is just another example of that I think if you're resting on your laurels, you're sticking with just legacy virus scanners, then you'll be in trouble. But then there's also, like, I kind of remember when hacking changed from people that were really good at finding security holes to internet kind of happened. And then rather than sharing tips over bulletin board services, it became sharing tools over bulletin board services on how to compromise places, till you have a whole generation of what came to be called script kiddies that had very little technical knowledge and were able to do bad things. And the worry is that there's a lot you can do with AI from a sort of a script kiddie point of view without having that detailed technical knowledge, which just means the barrier to entry is a lot lower than it once was.
And I see it so much I work with a lot of education clients, and I see it so much with them where it's not actually bad actors in the wide world that are a problem. It's students, because they are doing that. I'm good at Googling, I'm good at putting this in, and I actually want to test. And they're the biggest pain in the backside for your IT managers and your IT directors in the education space, is going, I've got a really smart 13-year-old here who's trying to take our security down every day. And it's like, if they can do it, then if the bad actors really want to do it, they've got the tools to do it. So we just, if you're not investing, that's where you've got to be investing in this security platforms, right? You've got to be looking at not something that just does, it's an AV. It needs to be an AV and so much more. We're looking at XDR, we're looking at managed detection and response, we're looking at all those kind of EDR technologies. You need to have all that, and that's just a baseline. It can't be a nice to have anymore. It's like have this, and then at least you've got something to try and defend yourself with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I certainly think AI is going to help in the speed and automation of creating them, which is going to become more challenging for sort of traditional based antivirus software, like you just said, James. It's going to enable them to create, I suppose, viruses, ransomware, whatever you want to call it, that can learn or potentially learn from how the systems that are defending against them, allowing them to create more variants and evade detection. And then because there's lots of forums out there, both good and bad forums, once people learn around where specific vulnerabilities are in particular environments, you can really AI could be used to make sophisticated attacks to get round specific vulnerabilities or environments that have slightly got dodgy security on. But I suppose that also comes down to, I know it's very boring, but making sure people are regularly updating and patching all of their systems, which still doesn't happen in every business. They're not necessarily keeping up with security patches. And that is a fundamental basic. And I think some businesses still don't do it properly.
And that's also a point as well that brings up with software development, which is where my sort of sweet spot is. It also becomes very important right from the architectural decisions that you make down to the individual coding and the coding standards, is you have to be aware, a lot more aware now, of what the potential attack vectors and attack surface areas are. There's things like input sanitation, where often what people will do is they'll do input sanitation at the point that it comes into your system, but then they'll ignore it sort of through the rest of the process, saying, well, it's already been sanitized once. But as the attacks get more sophisticated, you have to start looking at implementing basically architectural decisions like zero trust architecture, where you assume that everything that's coming towards you, even from the most sacred, like your sort of core database, you look at it with complete suspicion, as if it's an outside attack, and you prepare yourself for it. So if people do make these keys, if this sort of script kiddies and similar are trying sort of easy attacks, they're not able to do it. Also very important to make sure that you keep up with your pen tests, or if you're getting software built for you, or you're getting systems integration done, you have to make sure that you independently verify the security and the efficacy of everything that's been done as much as you possibly can. And that your engineers or whoever's doing the software aren't taking shortcuts that are going to come to bite you.
It comes back to leaning on that ISO, doesn't it? Sorry, Rhys.
I know. I was just going to say, I suppose you've with a resource like ChatGPT, you essentially have the means to create whatever you want. Obviously there are limitations, but there are, as we touched on earlier, there are ways of sort of manipulating it and sort of getting around that. So I suppose with the script kiddies, as you mentioned, Ben, has sort of gone beyond the days of just DDoSing and things like that, sort of petty things, and perhaps it's getting a bit more sophisticated with the attacks that maybe these kids are able to do, whether it's their sort of school system or anything really. But yeah. Right. So I wanted to home in a little bit more on like specific data sets and things like that. So I just wanted to ask you guys, where do you think data in businesses is most at risk when using AI?
The most obvious place to start is personal identifier information, or PII. That tends to be the most risky data that we see most commonly being fed into AI engines. Sometimes by mistake, and sometimes people are just not thinking about it, right? So, write me this letter to my employer. Here's my details, and you feed it your name and your address. That's where it starts. But people start going from there very quickly to feeding it huge chunks of business data, or to a point that Ben made earlier, start feeding it IP, sort of intellectual property data, and going, oh cool, here's some code that I've written. It doesn't work. Could you fix it for me? And suddenly you're pumping that out there. That data all becomes potentially at risk depending on what those vendors of these AI services are essentially doing with that data, because all of them, if you read through their T's and C's, will say we don't take this data, we sanitize it down, we do X, Y, and Z, but you get no information about what that kind of process looks like. So you have to assume that any data you're feeding there could well be returned in a very well kind of plain text way, or could be used to train the model into giving your answer back to someone else, essentially. So that's where I see a lot of the data risk coming from in terms of business data at the moment.
So yeah, it's been safe for about 10 years now. I think people have been saying that data is going to be the new oil, and I think we're sort of getting to that point now. And my sort of prediction, as much as any prediction's good, is that most businesses will need to have their own language model. They'll need to take all their data, they'll need to consolidate it, they'll need to figure out how to put these rails on it. And once you do that, you're just exposing a whole new set of risk. So I mean, ideally what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to have, in the sort of the vision of where we're going, is you want to be able to log in as a company. You want to call up an individual employee, have their contract on file, have everything on file. HR needs to be able to find out all the specific information about that. Have they been in trouble for anything? What's their notice period? How long they've been employed for? What would be the total cost of making this position these positions redundant versus those position redundants? You then want to be able to pull up all your supplier contracts, and all these, you have them all in the model so you can interact and you can poll it and you can do all this wonderful stuff. And what that means is that your data is all in one place. And we've already seen the sophistication that people will go, like you have websites that have very sophisticated bot detecting things to stop companies from basically stealing all their prices, finding out what all their prices are, particularly for anything that involves like a reservation, like airlines and car booking and hotel bookings. Bots will try and go on and scrape everything off and take that data, and the battle's been to stop that. And I think on all the front, the data attack, it's just going to get bigger and bigger because it's profitable. If I know, if I had Adobe's list of that whole data model, if you imagine they had this whole thing and someone was able to steal that, you have their whole business. So it becomes quite critical, and how we segment that, how we use that, the rails that we put on that is going to be a massive consideration in the next 10, 20 years.
It's a really good point about having data in one place, right? People keep forgetting about the fact that the more you consolidate this stuff. And the only thing I wanted to sort of finish with Rhys on that was that we've seen this big push from Microsoft with Copilot, and that's going to become part of everyone's lives if you're a Windows or a 365 user as we move into next year. The expectation from Microsoft is that as a business that you're tagging your data, which I can tell you from the number of customers I work with, people just don't do that. Especially when you talk about file data, people might tag data in databases. File data, people are not good at flagging it, but the expectation is it's on you, right? So if you're going to have a folder of HR data on your SharePoint or on in your emails, you have to flag it and tell it that that's sensitive and that shouldn't be scanned. Otherwise, by default, Copilot, when it launches, is going to go, I'm going to ingest all that data, and then I'm doing exactly what Ben was talking about, and I'm learning from that data. But as soon as it's done that, you've got a huge problem, because then that engine, if that's compromised or if that data set is lost, suddenly it has a load of information in that we shouldn't be sharing outside the organization. And it definitely becomes one of these things where you have to understand so much more about what the tools you're using are and what they expect from you, because they're quite clear with what they expect from you, but you may not necessarily know what that is. And that's what you have to kind of take that journey first and go, right, well, if we're going to use these tools, what should we be doing? How should we be approaching the data set? What should we be doing? What should we be sanitizing out? What should we be moving to somewhere else before we start going, cool, AI, here's my system, crack on.
It's also the unintentional consequences. So, for example, Google Gmail had a nice little feature where it would read through your Gmail, and if it saw that you had a flight, I remember was one of the things, it would sort of handily put a thing in your calendar saying, "Oh yeah, this flight's happening on this day," which is all very innocuous if it's your own private, kind of private calendar and all that. But if that happens and then it ends up on a public calendar, and you're in competition with someone for a job or for a promotion at a job, and then that person that you're competing with notices that you're flying to HQ and they're not, there's unintended consequences like that. They can, and the basically, so it's like we as we implement all these things, we also get into, well, what's the what are the unintended consequences? And I think we'll see a lot of those, and then start to sort of figure out the landscape a bit more.
All right, nice one. Yeah, obviously, quite sort of conscious of time. We did have a few more questions, but I think we'll probably have to follow those up another time. So, yeah, thank you guys. I was wondering if you guys had any sort of final thoughts or anything you'd like to add.
I suppose from my point of view, I'm going to finish it the same way. I've been doing these AI tours for the last couple of months and talking to people. I think the ultimate thing is AI really is amazing, right? It's a huge win for business, a huge win for people, a huge win for productivity. But if you don't use it correctly, you don't understand it, and you don't secure it, then it's a massive problem. So just do that bit, right? Let's understand it, let's secure it, and then let's use it correctly. And then we're all going to be really happy. And we can go to cracking on with our other jobs, rather than, as Ben mentioned, trying to split our focus on 19 other jobs at the same time.
And I guess my thing is, I mean, I think quite patently, I think the three of us or four of us could sit here for days possibly having this conversation. So if anyone's interested, I know my contact details are with us. Do please feel free to reach out. Happy enough to take conversations offline. If you're in Nottingham, we do have a monthly data science and AI meetup that you can come to. Feel free to contact me about that, or go up onto the meetup.com site. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I suppose from me, it's to say thanks everyone for listening in to us, talking AI and cybersecurity. But from my point of view, it's about having the right management in place in selecting the AI in the first place, and then how you control its usage. And slightly biased, but 27001 really helps towards businesses embracing AI and getting the benefits from it without risking their crown jewels, shall we say.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, nice one, guys. Thank you all for being here. If anyone has any questions, please drop one of these guys a line, whether it be on LinkedIn or you can get in touch with them directly. But yeah, I think that just about finishes it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye bye.